Well, good afternoon, good evening. We are so grateful that you can join us today. I am Pastor Sean Arthur, the Senior Pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And today we're having a courageous conversation. Our special guest is Pastor Amanda Hawley. I'm looking forward to having this awesome conversation. Pastor, so good to see you. I'm so excited that you have been able to join us today for our Courageous Conversations series. I have known you such a long time, and it's just a privilege and a joy to have you with us. As you know, the month of March is Women's History Month, and I just thought it's so kind and special to highlight wonderful women who are doing something great in culture and in society, and you are one of those persons, and we're looking forward to getting to meet you, getting to know you, getting to know a little more about your story, and just so you can just show all these wonderful ladies, young women, how to be courageous and make your stamp and place in the world. So
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, so Pastor, listen, I know a lot about you, or at least I think I do. But can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and where you're from, who you are? Just give us a little breakdown of who you are.
Sure. So I am Pastor Amanda Hawley. I am a native of Columbus, Ohio. So I am a Midwestern girl. I was not born in Ohio, but I've lived there, through my all of my childhood. So since 5 years old, I am the daughter of Chaplain Leonard Hawley. So my father is an ordained minister in the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, but he served as a corrections chaplain for the state of Ohio for about 30 years before he retired. My mom is a nurse. I like to have good times. I like to have fun. Sean, I like to laugh and, cut up and crack jokes. I call myself a creative, not an artist, because I like to do creative stuff. So sometimes I can be artsy, but cooking, singing, writing, drawing, collages. I like to do crafty stuff. I like to paint, just kind of whatever. I've dabbled in floral decorations or floral arrangement, just kind of any and everything. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could go on. I like to read. I call myself a jack of all trades, master of none. So,
well, I've seen your handiwork, but one thing I do remember, you can sing. My goodness. I love music, but man, I remember you blowing it up at Oakwood and on the music scene doing that. So that's one of my fondest memories of you. Oh man, so that's awesome. So good. We're around it, like to do a little bit of everything, not in a box. That's cool. Yes. All right. So now, Pastor, just tell us a little bit about your educational background and academic.
Sure. So I tell everybody ministry is a second career. I wanted to be a psychologist. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get my PhD and be a professor. And I'm a research nerd at heart, love to look stuff up and read about it and analyze it. So I went to Oakwood. I was a psych undergrad. So I'll be honest, I stayed away from Mosley Complex. I only went there for the classes I had to take, and that was it. And then I moved to Chicago to work on a master's in clinical psychology. And that's kind of when things fell apart. The program, I was doing very well in the program, but to exit, you have to take a comprehensive exam. And I could not pass this comprehensive exam. It was a 2-week take-home exam. It was a case conceptualization, and I was actually very good at case conceptualizations. But with this particular one, they put a page limit on it, and I could not give them everything that they wanted within the page limits because you have to put in-text citations and all this and that, and I just didn't have enough space. So I would fail every time, and I knew exactly why I was going to fail because they're like, you left this out, and I'm like, well, that was on page 11 and 12. But you only told me I could, do this in 10 pages. And I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. And I still don't know, but that was really where things began to fall apart. And that's when I was at a crossroads. Because at that point, I was very self-reliant, and really I was cocky because I was smart and I knew I was smart. I was good. I was doing well in the program. You know, I had a 3.78 GPA in graduate school.
Wow.
Like, you couldn't tell me nothing. Like, one of my professors was like, "Oh, you're a gifted therapist." My head was as big as the room. I'm like, what? I'm a gifted therapist and I haven't even graduated yet? Like, move out of the way, Freud. Amanda Hawley is on the scene. So I was, you know, really ready to make my mark, and God, truly desiring to save all of us, had to knock me down, you know, a lot. So I honestly believe that that's why I failed, because God, knowing what he had planned for my life, not that there's anything wrong with psychology, but ministry was not even on the landscape of what I wanted to do with psychology. And it's funny because when I was younger, I had a pastor who actually was like, are you sure God hasn't called you to ministry? And I laughed in his face, Sean. I laughed like from my belly and was like, the Adventist church isn't ready for female pastors. And no, I am not called to ministry. Those words came out of my mouth.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, once I couldn't pass my comprehensive exam, they dismissed me from the program. So I could have transferred to another program. But by that point, I was so disillusioned. I had so much student loan debt because when you transfer from one program to another, they only accept a certain number of credits. So I pretty much would have to repeat the whole program. I would have had to have done my internship all over again. And I'm like, I didn't have any more energy and effort to lend to this. So I was living in Chicago at that time. So I moved back to Columbus. And that's really when I had to make a decision. I was either going to fully submit to God and allow him to fix it, or I was going to try and continue to fix it myself. And I knew at that point I had done everything humanly possible to try and salvage my little academic career, and nothing was working. So begrudgingly, I'm just like, okay, God, what do you want? And it took a couple of years. You know, I was working at Lane Bryant, you know, in retail. I was working at CAA as a teacher's aide. I was singing at a Lutheran church on Sundays. Like, I was hustling, but I was angry because I'm like, I am a therapist. You know, I'm not supposed to be out here, you know, folding size 28 jeans and, you know, running after kindergartners. Like, that is not what I was trained to do, you know. So I was still cocky. Like, I was supposed to be, you know, healing people and, you know, working on my research and getting ready to, you know, transfer into a PhD program, like living at home with my parents, no car, you know, student loan debt. Like, God, like, just removed all of that. But as I was going to church, I remember a sermon. I can't remember who preached the sermon, but the sermon was talking about Jacob and how Jacob idolized Rachel, like his desire to work essentially 14 years for a wife. Like, yeah, he was deceived, and that's how it ended up being 14. But the point is, he idolized her. And the sermon was talking about how when we place things before God, God removes them. You know, so the pastor, he kind of flirted with this idea, not directly saying that that was the reason why Rachel died, that God was trying to remove her, but, you know, really just kind of pinpointing a weakness in Jacob's character. And that resonated so much with me because I realized my intelligence and my self-reliance was an idol, and God was removing that from me, and it hurt. It hurt. So from that was really the setup for me to begin to seek God and to cultivate a real relationship with him. And from that, then I got the call to ministry, which I was completely blown away. Like, why me, Lord? And, you know, then I went to seminary, and, you know, now I've been pastoring for 5 years, but that.
Wow. So you had like a Paul type of moment, and God knocked you off the beast.
Yeah.
That is incredible to hear the backstory until you're called to ministry. So you go on to pursue the MDiv. So then how long have you been pastoring now?
I have been pastoring for 5 years. Woo woo, I made it to 5. I celebrate that because, as you know, sometimes you're like, am I going to make it?
Yes.
I didn't know if I was going to make it to 5 years sometimes, but I did. So I started in 2016 here in Northeastern Conference. So
awesome.
the Great Northeastern.
Yes,
I served for 5 years as the assistant pastor at Kingsborough Temple, which is in Brooklyn, New York. So big ups to Brooklyn. Whoop, whoop.
Yep.
And in January, I was reassigned. So I am getting ready to transition to Connecticut. I will be the pastor of the Breath of Life Fellowship in Stamford, Connecticut.
Oh, awesome.
So, yeah.
So that's all 5 years in ministry. Oh, so now you talked a little bit about that realization of being called to ministry. Just delve into that just a little bit. Like, was it you heard a scripture? You said you heard a sermon. How did it become more clear?
So it was kind of at that time, when I'm trying to pick up all the pieces and, figure out what I want to do. I joke every week I had a new career. I was going to be a life coach, a personal chef. I was going to be an entrepreneur. I was going to go back to school for journalism. I was just trying to figure out with my talents, with my interests, what's going to be the best fit for me. And like I said, I was kind of on this, I don't want to call it like an official spiritual journey, but I was definitely being much more intentional about seeking the Lord. And so praying and really seeing what it is that God wanted to do with my life. I began singing more at my church and serving more, and really became just kind of fascinated with worship and what draws people to worship. And, so I was just paying attention to those things more. And one night, it was a Sabbath night, Friday night, I was talking with my mom and I'm like, I just want to do something that puts all of my talents together. Like, what is it where I can, I like people. I enjoy helping people. I'm good with administration and I love singing and creative things. What is the job that puts all of those things together? When I find that job, that is what I'll do. And I had this thought and I looked at my mom and I said, if I was a pastor, I could do all of these things. And it's like, as soon as it came out of my mouth, it's like, wait, what? And my mom, I'm so glad she was with me because her eyes lit up and my eyes lit up. And she's like, Mandy, that's the Lord. Like this is it. And I'm like, and it's like conviction just set in for both of us. Like it was a beautiful moment for us to share, because I think if it had just been me by myself, I would have thought I was crazy. But because my mom was there and she was like, no, like, it fits. It makes sense. Like this is it. And it was so clear. And it's hard to really articulate it more than that. It was just like, it just made sense. Looking at everything that God was piecing together, and just some things from my childhood, where God had used me in ways that were kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it and like sound like I'm bragging, but, just like God had used me in ways where it's like, man, like this kid is like, special, or, like God's going to do something with her. But I've never seriously considered ministry. And so I called Dr. Hyveth Williams because she's a very good family friend, and, just kind of shared with her everything. And she's like, it sounds like God is calling you to me. I mean, she's like, you have to pray, and confirm that. She's like, I can't say yes or no. She said, but, this sounds like something that God would do and could do in your life. So I went and visited her. She was at Andrews. And so I stayed with her and she gave me some good counsel. I was talking to Pastor Donald Burden. We had a couple of sessions, where he prayed with me and talked with me. And because I'm just kind of like, you all got to help me out. Like, I don't even know what this means. Like my father is a minister. He's a chaplain. He was talking to me as well. But for me to see myself as a pastor, I had no idea what that looked like. I didn't even really know what it meant to be a pastor. Like, aside from preaching, I'm like, what do you do? Like, I know you do stuff, but what is it? And, like, so they really, God blessed me with people to kind of help me navigate, and really understand that. And then, I went to Andrews and of course learned a whole lot more. And, but that's really what it was, just, and what resonated with me was just this surprise that, because to me, I mean, spreading the gospel is like the most important thing, and the fact that God wanted to use me in that capacity, I guess it's almost kind of like, holding a baby for the first time. It's just like, all you keep thinking is, I don't want to break it. I don't want to mess it up. Like, I don't want to drop it. I don't want to fumble the ball. Like, this is such an awesome responsibility that God is entrusting on me. And just kind of continuously being overwhelmed and amazed that God wants to use me in such a significant work.
Wow. It's just amazing to hear how he's working. So now, take a little further. It said 5 years into the ministry, so now living that call. So what has been some of the biggest challenges you have faced in ministry, especially being a woman? So you can nuance it, just being in ministry, then being a woman in ministry.
Sure. So I'll try and tease them apart because sometimes when people ask me that, I'm like, how does it feel to be a man in ministry? It's like, I've been a woman all my life. So but there are some nuances. I'd say the biggest challenge I've faced in being a pastor is really one of identity. So, because you're constantly growing as a person. And for me to not have a background in ministry, I wasn't that kid who preached at church. I sang, I sang in the children's choir. I helped out behind the scenes. I wasn't like the preacher kid, even at Oakwood, I wasn't going around preaching. And like, I just didn't have that kind of background and connection to ministry. So trying to realize, okay, this is who I am. And then this is who people expect me to be or who I'm supposed to be as a pastor, and reconciling the two. That's been challenging and difficult because part of me, initially, I kind of swung to the opposite spectrum of, okay, I have to change, and kind of water down or dumb down my personality. Like, you can't joke as much. And, even like wearing colors and, makeup and fingernail polish, and like how you have to wear suits and, look like I've been mourning all the time, black and gray with a white top and, just kind of all of this. You have to be serious and holy all the time. And I'm like, there's a time and a place for that. But I'm like, I'd really rather just wear a pair of jeans and eat ice cream and let's talk about the Lord. Like, can I do that? And so it took me a while to kind of gain my own footing. And I'm still, growing in that in terms of I'm going to be who I am. And I will change some things, for the sake of the call or, the office of being a pastor. But what I'm not going to be is, now to kind of force myself. Because really, if you want to look at it from a woman's perspective, ministry, it's a man's world. And so when you're entering as a woman, it's like, how comfortable are men and others, members, with my femininity? And what my femininity looks like, because it's not the same for all women. Every woman, I like pink, like you can pink glasses, pink flowers, but every woman does not like pink, but that doesn't mean that they're not feminine, so while I do like pink, you also know I can be stubborn and quite outspoken. So can you handle, a woman that's like, well, that's not what I think, so I'm not going to be silent and sit down, so just trying to wrestle with what kind of woman do I want to be? How do I navigate through a male dominated field and still show up, take up space, be present in the room, and then deal with, I think I'm being assertive, you think I'm being aggressive. I think I'm setting boundaries, you think I'm being rude. And just kind of not letting all of those voices get in your head. One of the things that I struggle with, and I'm finding myself beginning to struggle with a little bit more as certain opportunities are presented to me. I'm beginning to wonder, if I was a man, would I get the same opportunity? So am I getting it because you need a female or you need a young female? So, there's a whole group of us, that are kind of up and coming young women in ministry, changing the game. They can preach and they can do this and, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, are we getting these opportunities because you really want us there, or because you're afraid of getting dragged on social media if you don't have a female on your flyer? So those are some of the things where, as a woman in ministry, if you let it, it can be very overwhelming, and what I've realized is, I bring my best to whatever I do. So I mean, it's kind of like, you're integrating. That's really what it is. When I have conversations with people, the same challenge that people of color, whether it's Black, Latino, Asian, whatever, other ethnicity, when you're trying to integrate into the dominant society, there is always that element of tokenism, but the weight now is, okay, I may have gotten into the room because I'm a woman, but now then you have the other stressor of now I need to prove to you that I'm worth being here, which even that is frustrating, because if you're new and you don't have a lot of experience, you're going to make mistakes, but you can feel like there's no room to make mistakes, because if I make mistakes, how is that going to affect other women in ministry, those that are coming behind me? Am I, making sure I'm representing all of us well, because we're still so new, where it's like, one failure, can affect how others are viewed. That's why women shouldn't be in ministry, or, they can't handle the pressure, or, whatever.
Wow.
Whatever it is. So identity has really been a challenge. I tell people, I don't get upset when people call me Amanda. I know for some people that can be a trigger, but I don't mind it, because I tell people my first name is not Pastor. It's not on my birth certificate. It's not on my passport. It's not on my driver's license. Like, I am Amanda, my role, my position is a pastor, and if I feel that somebody's, calling me Amanda to be rude, then I will correct them, but like, especially like colleagues and like people who knew me before I was a pastor. Now they're like, oh, do I have to call you pastor? And I'm like, no, we went to Oakwood together. Like, you can call me Amanda. Like, it's okay. Like, I know who I am. I'm confident in who I am, So sometimes even that, just feeling like, where is Amanda? Those have been my biggest challenges.
Like sometimes they say like the imposter syndrome type of deal, and just saying, oh, I'm feeling out this role. So that's interesting. So then, would you consider yourself like a trailblazer in ministry then? Seeing that you're like one of the first. So are you like one of the first female pastors with Northeastern?
I was the second hired. The second full-time hired female pastor at Northeastern. Right now we have 3 full-time female pastors. So Pastor Donette Blake, she was the first female pastor. She served, I want to say, about 10 years, give or take a year, before they hired me. So she'd been here, for an extensive amount of time. And then they hired me. And then they also hired Pastor Tiffany Tan. She's serving part-time, but she's doing a Cantonese church plant in Massachusetts. So she's doing significant work. And then Dr. Paula Olivier, she transferred from Allegheny East, and now she's in Northeastern.
Yeah. She's my in-laws pastor.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Wow. So second female pastor. So the weight of that, how does it feel to have that kind of pressure? Well, you kind of described a little bit, that kind of pressure.
So I would say, like, when I actually got picked up by a conference and started working and really started doing the math, that's when I realized, man, I am a trailblazer, for the sheer fact of numbers, because there are so few of us, and having female colleagues that have been trying to get a call. Some it took years, some are still, trying to get a call despite the work that they've done. And just realizing how difficult it is to actually get into the system. And I think I looked it up a while back. I don't know what these stats are, but I think it's women in all of the NAD, women make up, it's less than 5% of the pastoral workforce. And this was based off of the information. I forget the website, but like if you Google like NAD, women's ministerial, they have the brochure. And so that brochure, it's been out for a while. So the numbers may be a little higher. So I don't have like current, within like the last 5 years, I don't have like current stats, but if it's at 10%, I would really be shocked. So there's a long way to go. So definitely a trailblazer. Just because there's not a lot of us. And I think going into ministry, I did not realize. I thought more trees were cut down in the forest, and I'm like, oh no, there's not. there's not.
There's a whole forest.
Right. There's a whole forest.
There's a whole forest.
I thought we were little. I thought we were further into the woods.
Wow. So then it's like you're lifting while climbing, kind of idea. Wow.
Yeah.
So why do you think it is so important for women to be in ministry?
So the first reason why I think it's important for women to be in ministry is because God calls us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think that's been the biggest frustration. It's like people tend to forget, should we let women in ministry? Like, it really shouldn't be up to you. Because man doesn't give the call. God gives the call. Man doesn't equip. God equips. Yeah. So and really in that sense, it's like God has the final say, and part of me, when I really, am filled with, righteous anger, I'm like, man, you wait until judgment comes, and God's like, you stood in the way of what I was trying to do because you thought you knew better. When God's like, I am the one who decides, I give the call. He gives the call. Man does not give the call. Man, woman, human beings don't decide, you're called versus you're not called. So just that premise, that we have is faulty. So it's important for women to be in ministry because that is what God has called us to do. And I think any minister knows the frustration and the tension that comes from when you want to step out of alignment of what God has called you to do, and so now imagine God calling you to do something and you can't do it, or at least you can't do it in a way where you can sustain yourself and your family. Because sure, you don't have to be picked up by a conference to preach and to teach, but you have bills to pay, you have food to eat, you need health insurance. So, now having to push and have your own little independent ministry on the side because the conference won't hire you, like that's not correct either. So women need to be in ministry because God is calling and has been, and I believe always has, called women to also be his vessels, to be his mouthpiece, and to be his messengers. And so it's also important because women bring, we bring a different perspective and a different, experience of the gospel, one that I think, and it's not to put down men, like, men cannot do the job, but I think, it's like realizing that the two of us together are better, why did God make, man and woman, Adam and Eve? He made both in the image of God. So just like, the classic characteristics that men have, and we attribute that to, the character of God, the same thing comes with women. So there's perspectives and elements that we bring to ministry that I believe are really powerful and really needed. So there is definitely a space and a need for women to be present in ministry.
Oh yes. I firmly believe that. So knowing then that representation matters, do you feel your ministry has encouraged other women to accept their call to ministry?
I believe that it has. And that, it's kind of hard. It's hard to tell, but one of the things that, I do have a couple of like mentees, that I talk to and, encourage, they attend Oakwood, and, I just try and encourage them and just share with them experiences, perspectives, how to respond, those types of things. So I believe that it has encouraged them. But there's two stories that I'll share with you briefly. One was from one of my members. Her daughter was really, kind of a shy kid, around other people at home, of course, she's, got to play and this and that, but in public, more quiet, more reserved. And her mom came up to me and she's like, I just want to encourage you to continue, in ministry. And she's like, my kids were playing and they were playing church. And, it came down to who was going to be the pastor. And she was like, I'm going to be the pastor. Mm-hmm. And the boys were like, you can't be the pastor. You're a girl. And she said, nah, Pastor Hawley is a woman and she's a pastor and she preaches and she baptizes. So I'm going to be the pastor. Yes. And so she was the pastor that round.
Yes.
And her mom was just like, the confidence, for her to just be like, no, my pastor is a woman, and if she's like me, if she can do it, I can do it, even in play, so that just always was like, man, like little kids are watching. And it's like when you see women doing different things, it at least gives you the option in your mind. So it's like now as she continues to grow and develop and God reveals, his plan for her life, if she's going down, that road, now she's seen at least one female pastor. So she knows it's possible, if she feels the call on her life. So that was amazing. And second story, just when I left Kingsborough, one of my members, she's, a young lady, just a couple years younger than me. She's like, I want to thank you. She said, because it didn't dawn on me until I was talking with some friends, what it meant for me to see a woman my age, Black like me, delivering the word and taking on that spiritual authority, and just how encouraging that was for me to know that if God speaks to you and uses you in this capacity, he can speak to me and, use me in that capacity. Like, I don't have to think that I'm less than, like seeing you, someone who looks exactly like me. And the funny thing is we do kind of look alike, same similar hairstyle, this and that. She's like, seeing someone who looks like me, delivering the word of God, ministering, handling that authority well. She's like, it just is such an encouragement to me. So representation matters.
It matters. It opens up the world. And so that is incredible to know that you are making a literal, real, in real time difference. So that's amazing. And all because you accept what you call. So now let me ask you this one now. So how does your place in ministry change how the church, and I'm talking about the larger church, has viewed women in ministry?
In some ways I feel like it hasn't.
Oh, man.
That one, that's tough because, to be honest, sometimes I feel like it hasn't made a difference, because while, yes, I'm still trailblazing, how many years has Brenda Billingee, Hi Beth Williams, Esther Knott, Dr. Ifeoma Kwesi, I forget. I feel like there's another, but these women, like they've been in ministry for decades.
Yes.
And doing quality work for the Lord. Out preaching men, out baptizing men, truly like competent ministers. And it made a little bit of a difference, in the fact that there's more of us now, but change is slow.
Change is slow.
Change is slow. And, there are times where it does feel like you're not really making a difference, or you may be winning people over on the local level, but it's not making a dent in terms of ordination. It's not making a dent in terms of women taking on more leadership positions within the church, or, with Sandy Roberts, not being recognized, as the president of her conference, but some people are like, oh, but she's treated with respect. Her name is not listed. How is that respect? It's like she's tolerated, and it's like, let something happen. And I feel, let something happen in that conference where their financial contribution diminishes.
Yes.
As long as we do good work, we, can somewhat have our foot in the door. And that's where I do get frustrated, where it's like, I don't know what the answer is to that, to bring about change. Things are changing. It's just, it's slow. It's slow. And I just keep telling myself it's a marathon.
Yeah.
It's a marathon.
It's a marathon. So the encouragement is that you and others are still pushing forward. I still remember I was a delegate at the 2015 General Conference. and I cast my vote in favor of women's ordination. And I can still remember seeing the heartbreak on the faces of all the women who have served faithfully, even the ones who I went to seminary with in Oakwood. And so I think the needle is shifting. And so I want to say thank you for keep on pushing. The church is slow, but I think it's coming around. Justice is going to come. Yeah. So in saying that, right? So then, how do you then encourage, knowing that kind of climate? Do you encourage other women to go into ministry, knowing how the church is?
You know, I encourage, in that sense, I encourage women and men the same. Yes. Because while, yes, you have, this frustration, the challenges of being a woman in ministry, the bigger weight, honestly, is just being a pastor. So I don't think about, being a woman in ministry every single day. I have been blessed where Kingsborough did not give me any pushback or challenge because I was a woman. Yeah. So there may have been members who may not have wanted me to be there or may have questioned my ability, but it was not like a hostile, situation. Like I never had any of my members that are like, we're leaving because she's coming, or, you have no place here. Like I've been blessed, truly blessed to not have those experiences. So because of that, on a day-to-day basis, that is not, on the forefront of my mind. But, what I tell young women who talk to me and young men who talk to me is you first have to be clear that this is what God is calling you to do, because ministry is difficult. It's challenging. It's hard. It is hard. So you have to, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
No, I'm saying it's not for the faint of heart.
It is not. It is not for the faint of heart. So I'm like, what is going to be your anchor is knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is the path. This is what God has called me to do. And so once you know, and you're solid on that, then I'm like, all right, now let's talk about how to navigate this thing. Yes. What to expect, what to, what to say, what to do, what not to say, what not to do. I've had a couple of calls for ministry opportunity days at Andrews and at Oakwood, and it's like, all right, I'm getting ready to meet with, the representatives from these conferences, all men, and it's like, okay, what do I do? How do I word this on my resume? What do I say? And what do I wear? And, all this and that. And so then it's like, all right, let's begin to, try and navigate the hurdles. And it's like, I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what worked for me, what did not work for me. And, I help them out that way. But no, I encourage them because I believe wholeheartedly when you do what God is calling you to do, that is where you have the most peace. That is where you have the most joy. So, and I also tell people it's God's responsibility, I'm like, he's not going to call you to something and then not give you an opportunity to do it. Now, that can be difficult because I know, women who are called who have not been picked up by a conference, but, just encouraging them, walking alongside them, like God is going to, like, he's giving you this call. He's giving you the talents for a reason. He will provide an opportunity for you to use them to his glory.
His glory. Oh, yes. So that is that the trailblazing, being the leader, having mentees, all that is so important. So you are doing a lot to make this ministry thing happen. So that's awesome. So now, just kind of looping back to now, how do you use all of your education and your whole education background in your ministry as you are doing ministry? Do your other degrees contribute? Just fill us in on that. Give us a picture of that.
Yeah, because it's like a tool. It's like, having a tool belt. So all of my training in psychology, it's greatly helped me. And it shapes and informs a lot of what I do, just in terms of working with people and, how to handle different challenges and conflicts and, crisis. Of course, I'm rusty in terms of like the classical, psychology stuff, but it definitely, informs. And I think the biggest area where I see it in my ministry is perhaps in my preaching, because I really try and preach, relational and emotional wholeness, because I believe the gospel speaks a lot to that. And so I just kind of have that, that bend in how I read scripture, especially, looking at what Christ has done, his words, his actions, who he spent time with. So it definitely informs my preaching. I'm like, and if you listen to, one or more of my sermons, you're going to hear, that bend towards dealing with just the challenges of being a human, stress, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, self-esteem, like those are issues. Cause I think those are the issues that people are dealing with all the time. And the Bible does speak about them. Now, it may not have the words anxiety or depression or imposter syndrome or low self-esteem, but the Bible has principles. And when you look at, the men and women that are in the Bible, they dealt with those very issues that we are dealing with. So I like to, lift those issues and lift those, character traits from the word. So when people read the Bible, they see themselves.
Yes.
And they see that God is a God where that matters to him. God is more than just don't sin, and accept Jesus Christ as your savior. If you're struggling with, self-esteem, if you have an eating disorder, if your marriage is falling apart, if you're overwhelmed, if you're stressed, if you're, if you have mental health issues, learning disabilities or learning abilities, as people like to call them, all of that matters to God. And he will sit right there in that place of pain and discomfort, and he will minister to you and be present. And so that's what I like to, to lift from the Bible. And a lot of that just comes from my background.
Yeah.
My background. Now, funny enough, I guess to kind of connect it earlier. So as a woman, I guess those kind of topics are like, preaching soft, and so that sometimes is frustrating, where it's just like, oh, you preached a lot about like grace. And I'm like, why do we view grace as soft?
Yes.
Like, have you not?
I will be told I'm bad.
Right. Beat me up and tell me I'm not worthy and, this, that, or the other. And I'm like, listen, you can't change by yourself. You need God's grace and mercy and the Holy Spirit to do his transformative work.
So you pointed out then our collective experience, background helps to inform our current ministry. So for that person who may be going in second career as ministry, they don't have to divorce themselves from it. Just bring that tool with you, right?
Yeah. Because ministry, like you really have to be strong. Like pastoral ministry today, it requires you to be like a triple threat. I kind of look at it in three categories. Like you have to be a teacher, a preacher, evangelist. You have to do those things well. You have to have pastoral care. You have to be able to nurture and encourage and walk with people and remember names and dates and, all of those things. You have to do that well. And then you have to be a great administrator, because you're dealing with all different types of things, insurance and taxes and, the building breaking down and managing the calendar and meetings and all this and that. So whatever field you're coming from, if this is a second career for you, chances are some element of your previous, experience is going to be used and is going to be helpful in pastoral ministry. Like you can't tell me a career, maybe zoology, where it's not going to fit, but like everything else, architecture, business, finance, health, fitness, journaling, communications, advertising, marketing, like all of it is needed somewhere in ministry. So it's going to, you may not be able to connect it to like the pulpit, but definitely, in the real, the realness of being a pastor, running the church, connecting with members, working in the community, you're going to use it. So the more tools you have in your belt, the better, I say.
Oh, yes. I thoroughly agree. The more tools you have, the more you can do.
Yes.
It's less stressful.
Yes.
So if you can reach in your tool bag, that can help. All right. So Pastor, tell us two questions. I want to follow up. These be our final two questions. So one is it's a little serious, and then the other one just kind of telling us kind of what you got going, what's kind of next, and what's future like, kind of thing. So I asked a serious question first, and then you can answer the more fun question last. So here's this one: how can lay members then champion the cause of ordination for women in the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Man, I'm thinking of several things. First, I would say if you really want to champion the cause of women in ministry, be knowledgeable. Yeah. And knowledgeable on various fronts, so, you have to understand how the Adventist church operates, whether you agree or you don't agree. So like I was talking to some young people one time and, just kind of the classic gripes and complaining and this and that. I asked them how many of them were baptized. The majority of them raised their hand. I asked them how many of them had read the church manual. None of them read their hands. And I was like, that is your war strategy. I'm like, if you don't know how the church functions, you can't change anything. I'm like, do you go to business meetings? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, if all of y'all went to a business meeting, I said, you could probably vote and get through whatever you wanted to get voted and get through, because you would simply outnumber the adults. Now, the next business meeting, they may come out in droves, but that first one, you could give them a run for their money. So if you want to champion the cause of women, be knowledgeable, about how the church works, about how session works, when you have representatives that come, and vote for different things, understand how the church structure works. So where you have opportunities to use your voice, you can. So that's one. Of course, I always say, invite women to preach, at different things, and not just this is not a knock against you, but not just in March, when it's Women's History Month, then you can check it off your box. Like, okay, we had a woman preach, and not just for Women's Day, like a regular day or, another event. Take the time to, find out how many women are in your conference, how many are there in your union, how many female pastors are in your union. Find out if your union ordains women, like your union does. My union does not. So, learning that, knowing what is the difference between ordination and commissioning. So you kind of have to start with this basic understanding, because as much as you can say, griping on social media may make some difference, it doesn't, because social media does not influence what happens when we have, sessions and voting and those types of things. So next, if you can do that, then I would say try and be, a delegate at either your conference session. And I mean, there's a whole, list of how, to be a GC session delegate, but try and be a delegate. Try and be a delegate, because again, that's where you're really being able to influence and make a difference, because we do things, kind of democratically in terms of voting. Do that, have conversations with people, educate people that are ignorant. Some people are like, I haven't heard that many female pastors preach, or I've only heard one, and you may not like her style, just like you may not like every man's style. So if you only heard one female and you don't like her style, encourage them to listen to another. There's more of us, and we all have different styles and, approaches in terms of how we preach and how we lead. So that's really what I would say to the, to the lay member, be educated. And then once you're educated and, then just kind of start, call the conference president and ask, you set up a meeting and ask, what's going on here, what's going on there, and begin to kind of put some pressure in terms of, this is something that is important. This is something that matters. If your church has an opening, or if your church has an assistant pastor position, tell the conference, we would like to have a female pastor. That's how I got my foot in the door. First senior pastor, Pastor Easton Marks, he specifically told the conference, do not send me me a male assistant pastor, I want a female assistant pastor. He said, because we don't have enough female pastors in this conference. At that time, there was only one. And he's like, that's ridiculous. So he made the calls, and somebody recommended me to him, and we met, but there were other women that he was trying to connect with as well, because he's like, I can't say that I am for women in ministry, and I know there's a position, and I'm not trying to fill that position with a female pastor. So just because you're a member, it doesn't mean that you don't have the ability, to say and to speak, and to vocalize and to say, we would like to have a female pastor, serve this position, or if there's, a position in the conference office, let the, try and see if the female pastor would be interested, put her over Sabbath school or stewardship or religious liberties or AY, so those are the things that members can do when you go to constituency meeting. That's really how you champion the cause.
Wow. Thank you for giving us that full breadth of how we can really champion. And I think some things is going to turn around. So here's the fun question that we end on, and that is, what are some things that you're currently doing, some projects that you're involved in? I know I see your face quite a bit of places, so thank you for your time today. I know you squeezed us in. And then just tell us how we can find you on your platforms and whatnot. So there's some things you got going, things that's coming up, projects, and then how we can find you.
Sure. So I will be completely honest. COVID slowed all my momentum down. in terms of projects, oh my goodness, 2020 just zapped all of my energy. But I recently started my own independent ministry called Amanda Hawley Ministries. So you can go to my website, amandahawley.com. So just first last name.com. And the purpose of Amanda Hawley Ministries is I really want to help women grow. So I want to help women connect with God in a more authentic manner. So really, the things that I do with that ministry, I wanted to serve as a bridge between what happens in church and then what happens in your personal life. And, really just talk about topics that may not lend themselves as easily to discuss in the sermonic moment. So as an example, we recently, last year, was it last year? Yes, it was last year. Last year, we did a 5-day self-love challenge. So talking about how self-love is biblical. And really what I did was I pulled from Corinthians, love is patient, kind, so on and so forth, and paired that up against self-love. And then also looking at, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so really looking at what self-love is and to kind of de-vilify it, it's not just, bubble baths and shopping sprees, self-love is accountability, self-love is responsibility, self-love is discipline, because that's what love is, so if that is how we are to love others, if that is how God loves us, then that is self-love. So we talked about that. At the end of the year, we did a, reflection challenge. I think it was another 5-day. I like 5 days. A 5-day reflective challenge from 2020. So just some prompts to give people time and space to reflect on how they saw God move in the midst of 2020, things they learned about themselves, just to kind of promote personal awareness. So that's really at the heart of Amanda Hawley Ministries. I have not done much. So if you go to my website right now, it's all out of date. I need to update it. Don't judge me. It's on my to-do list. But I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. Again, Amanda Hawley Ministries. You can find me that way. So that's one thing that I have going on. I have some ideas coming up this year that I want to work on. I'm going to leave it at just that for now. But I want to begin to shift and do some things in the community. So I'm trying to think of some creative ways to do more community involvement stuff. So, I'm transitioning to a new church. I definitely want to see, what they're doing and how to do more of that. But that's really it in terms of projects. I'm taking it easy this year. I tell everyone, 2020 was such a difficult and draining year. This year, my focus really is restoration. like just kind of recouping. So this year for me is not going to be like a high production year because I'm tired, like I just don't have like the bandwidth. I don't have it. So, and I don't feel bad about it. I'm like, it's like, that's the whole point. We talk about that with Sabbath, like rest is important. So you need to know when you need to recharge. And I'm like, right now, at least for the first half of the year, and I may even go the whole year, it's just to rest and rejuvenate. There are definitely some areas where I'm just like, okay, I need to reconnect with God. We're still in COVID, so it's still difficult and challenging, but I think the novelty of it is wearing off some. So it's not quite as triggering as it was last year. Last year, those first 6 months, it was absolutely awful. Oh my goodness. It was, especially here in New York, like, it was horrible.
Yes.
It was horrible. So those are the things. So just, I want to do more with Amanda Hawley Ministries this year. So that's the fun stuff. Those are my projects.
Well, Pastor, I want to say thank you for being with us today. And we pray that God will continue to bless your ministry, continue to make it fruitful and multiply as you continue to blaze the trail and inspiring me in this generation. Today, you have joined Courageous Conversations. We hope that you will continue to follow us. Again, thank you to Pastor Amanda Hawley and all of our speakers who have spoken for us this month. You can continue to follow her on her platforms there, as well as follow us here. May God continue to bless you. May God continue to keep you as we have these courageous conversations. God bless you.